Hello, and welcome to part 2 of my Super Metroid Justin Bailey playthrough. I'm Mofo Mike, and I'm blowing the shit out of some pirates. And we're gonna head down to Brinstar to do my first bit of sequence breaking. Woo! Yeah! And in the meantime, I guess I'll discuss one of the bigger topics that's been on my mind of late, if you will. Sonic the Hedgehog comic books were the first comic books that I ever read. I really got into them after I saw one at a local like supermarket type of place, or convenience store is actually a better term. And the issue I'll never forget, because to me, being 8 or 9, you know, it was pretty epic of a story for, you know, an 8 or 9-year-old. And it was the issue, I can't remember the number, but the issue was where Sonic had been roboticized and turned into Mecha Sonic. And Knuckles sort of sacrificed himself, you know, he allowed himself to be roboticized so that he could fight Mecha Sonic. And here we go, my first full attempt at a mock ball, and I utterly failed because the jump button didn't register when I ran through the door. Second attempt though, I get it. Promise. I get it right here. And booyah! There you go. Mock ball. The mock ball is I'll get back to the comics, but the mock ball is a speedrunning technique for getting through areas with those doors where you go morph ball while you're running and jumping through a door, and it'll allow the morph ball to move at running speed while you're still in morph ball state, so you're still able to get just barely under the door, the last door that you need to get through. And there's another missile in here, so don't forget it if you're using this as sort of like a guide or a walkthrough. Anyway, back to the comic discussion. Where was I at? Oh yeah, the comic issue, Mecha Knuckles versus Mecha Sonic. That, to me, at 8 or 9, was just insanely epic. And it also brings me to another point of discussion with comic books in general nowadays, is that you can't really find them in very many places except for the odd bookstore or dedicated comic book shop, because I don't live in California or anywhere like that where there's a lot of comic shops around, you know, or dedicated like D&D shops or anything like that. So, used to, when I was a kid, the only place I could really go to pick up comic books was my local like supermarket, or, you know, convenience store. The odd convenience store, a lot of them back then carried a pretty wide variety of comic books, to be honest. Some of the ones I remember the most are like the Sonic comic, because that was one of my favorites when I was a kid, but also they had, you know, a lot of DC comics like Green Lantern, Superman. Can't even remember all of the different ones they had. I think they had X-Men, Spider-Man, all the big like Marvel names, you know. And let's see. But yeah, you can't find them anymore for whatever reason at any kind of like supermarket, at least not any that I know of. And I think I know the reason. I'm not 100% on it, but as far as I can tell, the main reason was just because the prices of individual comic book issues, at least for Western comics, went up a pretty large amount between the 90s and the thousands, the 2000s. Like a pretty large leap. Like I think it used to be like $1.50 or $1 a piece per issue, and it went from that and it gradually went up, but it went up from like that to from $1.50 to $2 to $2.50 and then $3, and I think now it's up to like maybe $4 or more an issue, which is pretty ridiculous. I mean, it's understandable with how, you know, prices of other things have gone up over time, like oil, and probably the prices of ink and paper and all that stuff too also have gone up, I'm sure. So the price is just natural inflation, I would assume, but the price has gone up so much now that even supermarkets and other places just can't afford to stock comic books like they used to could. So unfortunately for me, that meant that after about issue 102 of the Sonic comic books, which is about how long I stuck around because I didn't have a subscription at the time, about that time is when they stopped carrying a lot of comic books in supermarkets and other places that were in easy access, because I didn't know of any local comic shops or anything near my house because there weren't any. The closest one was about like a half hour or more drive away, which is a pretty lengthy drive for someone that doesn't have a car, you know. And on top of that, it just if I were going to ask my parents, it wouldn't have been a worthwhile drive for them. And what I'm doing here is I'm trying to get to the first super missile power-up that you're supposed to get for fighting the Spore Spawn boss. And if you can get it ahead of time, you can skip him, but I fail utterly, and here you go. I spend about 3 minutes, oh yeah, trying to do that. But you don't have to worry about it. I did edit that out. I have some mercy, so you're just gonna watch me pick up this missile pack and the charge beam and head on up, and I think I give it one more try, but after that I just say screw it and go kill the boss. But yeah, it really disappointed me after I stopped being able to find comics around, because it used to be cool to just, you know, go into a supermarket or whatever while your parents are shopping for groceries. You usually didn't have a lot to do except follow them and ask for things. But for me, it was cool because then I could go into the gas station, or supermarket, not gas station, what am I saying? And I could just, you know, I could go in, look at the magazine rack, go, wow, man, look at that. Look at all these comics. And I'd pick up an issue and I'd sit down wherever and read the comic books that they had. New issues of different comics that I wasn't, you know, actually able to buy or whatever at the time. I'd just sit down and read, and by the time they were done shopping, I'd be done with like an issue or two of a comic. And yeah, I mean, it was just fun for me, because at that time I didn't really have a way to consistently buy games for, you know, Nintendo, for my Nintendo and my Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo that I had at the time, because that's all there was then at that moment. Well, I also had a Game Gear then too, and a Game Boy. Pokemon is what I was playing at that time, I think, the most. But yeah, that was probably one of the most exciting things, one of the more exciting things about my, you know, day-to-day life that I just remember as a kid, because, you know, you have those things that you used to always do with parents, or, you know, just things you used to do in general that you always remember. And that's one of the things that I always remembered, was being able to walk into supermarkets or wherever, and usually in the magazine section you could just find some comic books and go to town. But unfortunately I wasn't able to. And another thing, this is Sonic related mostly, but I used to watch the Sat AM show a lot, and I also saw the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 quite a bit, but I never cared much for that show, as most people tend to not. A lot of Sonic fans just, I mean, they know it and they're okay with it, but it's not really popular per se, except for like the memes, you know, like Pingus and everything else. But Sat AM was just really fun for me as a kid, because I used to spend, when it came summertime and I'd get out of school, I'd go to spend the days with my grandmother, because my mom had to work. So I'd go over there early morning. My mom would take me over there while she was on her way to work, drop me off. I'd get to stay there, and I'd watch, you know, Sat AM Sonic the Hedgehog every morning, and that was just a blast. And it was also in part because that show was a lot darker than most other, you know, Saturday morning cartoons at the time. And I was never much of like a G.I. Joe type of guy, and that was before I saw any anime or knew that anime even existed, because that wasn't until like the Toonami era on Cartoon Network, which was quite a ways off from then. And but yeah, I loved the hell out of that show. It was one of those shows that I just really loved to watch out of all the cartoons that were on TV at the time. And on top of that, I didn't spend nearly as much time inside playing video games in either, because in the afternoon, you know, I get to see a friend or whatever and go out and ride my bike up to, you know, the local school and ride around and everywhere and walk around, just talk and talk and talk and, you know, have fun. So yeah, I mean, it was one of the few shows that I got to watch. And after Toonami came on, I started to watch shows like Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, etc., etc., etc. Card Captors, you know, a lot of those shows. That's where I first got introduced to anime and Japanese style drawings in the first place, which is how I like to draw right now. But yeah, and also during school, this is just pertaining to school, purely to school. Whenever I'd do my work, I'd always write all my notes down and everything. I'd get a whole page of notes, but by the time class was over, all the edges of my paper, except for where my name, the date, and everything was, would always have all these doodles all over them. And I mean, some teachers didn't mind, and some actually liked it, believe it or not. But a lot of the time, I'd get, you know, some flack for it. You know, like I shouldn't be doodling and stuff while class is going on. But I usually always got all the notes that I needed to get, so it wasn't that big of an issue. It wasn't as big of an issue as a lot of the teachers I had over the years made a deal out of. And before I forget, actually, I'll just put it in the description, but yeah, it's the end of the part. We'll see you next time, guys. Take it easy.